What the hell are all of you doing here? What the hell are all of you doing here? This is private property!
Nobody expected a quiet, private family lake to become the center of the biggest neighborhood disaster in county history. It started when an overconfident HOA ignored property deeds, cut the locks off a private entrance, and invited hundreds of tourists to enjoy a lake they didn't legally own. Families arrived with boats, kayaks, and picnic baskets, believing they had every right to be there. But just days later, state wildlife officers counted 31 wild alligators gathering along the shoreline, forcing a full emergency evacuation. As panic spread across the community, one question echoed through every news report. Who was responsible? The answer would expose years of HOA deception and cost its leaders everything. For more than 70 years, Ronan Mercer, a 46-year-old marine contractor, had cared for Mercer Lake, a peaceful 60-acre body of water tucked behind dense cypress trees in southern Louisiana. The lake wasn't part of the surrounding subdivision. Long before the neighborhood existed, Ronan's grandfather had purchased the land, protected its wetlands, and placed conservation agreements on the property to preserve the local wildlife. Every deed, survey, and county record confirmed the same thing. Mercer Lake was privately owned. When a luxury subdivision called Cypress Ridge Estates expanded toward the shoreline, everything changed. The newly elected HOA president, Elaine Foster, believed the lake could become the community's greatest attraction. She imagined weekend festivals, paddleboat rentals, fishing tournaments, and higher property values. During HOA meetings, she repeatedly referred to Mercer Lake as a shared neighborhood amenity, despite having no legal document proving the claim. Ronan attended several meetings carrying copies of his property deed, professional surveys, and decades of tax records. Calmly, he explained that the lake had never belonged to the HOA and that public access would violate both private property rights and state environmental regulations. Elaine dismissed every warning. Within weeks, the HOA hired contractors to remove Ronan's locked entrance gate. New wooden signs appeared reading, "Welcome to Cypress Ridge Community Lake." Colorful advertisements spread across social media promoting free kayaking, fishing, and family events. Cars soon filled the narrow country roads. Boats crowded the shoreline. Visitors left trash, food scraps, and fishing bait scattered around the water's edge. Standing quietly beneath an old oak tree, Ronan watched strangers celebrate on land his family had protected for generations. He wasn't worried about losing the property. He was worried about what lived beneath the surface of the water. Ronan didn't wait for the situation to spiral. The morning after the grand opening, he delivered certified letters to the HOA board, the county zoning office, and the state wildlife agency. Each letter included copies of the original deed, updated land surveys, aerial photographs, and the conservation easement that had protected Mercer Lake for decades. He also warned that the lake bordered federally protected wetlands, where disturbing wildlife habitat could create serious safety and environmental risks. Elaine Foster ignored every document. Instead, she posted on the HOA's community page that Ronan was trying to keep the neighborhood from enjoying its own lake. The message spread quickly. Some residents believed her without question, accusing Ronan of being selfish. Others began parking along his private access road, leaving coolers, grills, and trailers wherever they could find space. Every weekend brought larger crowds. Fishing contests, paddleboard races, and children's swimming events turned the once quiet shoreline into a noisy attraction. Food wrappers, bait buckets, and leftover picnic scraps piled up near the water. Wildlife that had avoided people for years suddenly found an endless supply of easy meals. Then the first warning came. A local fisherman recorded a large alligator gliding just beyond the reeds. The video circulated online, but the HOA dismissed it as an old clip from another lake. Elaine even joked during a board meeting that one little gator isn't enough to scare away families. 3 days later, another alligator was spotted near a boat launch. Then another. State wildlife officers received multiple reports within the same week. During an early morning survey, biologist Dr. Celia Vaughn counted far more than anyone expected. The increased human activity and constant food waste had drawn 31 wild alligators from the surrounding wetlands into Mercer Lake. Before officials could close the area, hundreds of visitors arrived for the HOA's biggest event of the summer. By noon, terrified screams echoed across the shoreline as dark shapes began emerging from the water. Panic erupted in seconds. Parents grabbed their children and sprinted toward the parking area. Kayakers abandoned their paddles, while anglers dropped expensive gear into the water as they scrambled onto the shore. Sheriff's deputies rushed to clear the lake, and within minutes, emergency vehicles lined the entrance road. Dr. Celia Vaughn and her wildlife team immediately established a safety perimeter. Using drones and thermal cameras, they confirmed what witnesses had feared. The lake wasn't home to just a few wandering reptiles. It had become a temporary gathering point for 31 documented wild alligators. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live images of officers closing the area. Reporters repeated the same question: who authorized a public recreation site on a lake surrounded by protected wetlands? Elaine Foster insisted the HOA had every right to open the lake. Standing before television cameras, she claimed Mercer Lake was a community asset and accused Ronan Mercer of exaggerating the danger to stop neighborhood events. Ronan didn't argue. Instead, he quietly handed Deputy Nolan Briggs a thick leather folder that had belonged to his late grandfather. Inside were original property deeds dating back more than 70 years, professionally certified boundary surveys, annual tax records, and a conservation agreement signed with the state decades earlier. One document stood out above all the others: a recorded easement clearly stating that no commercial or public recreational activity could occur on the lake without written approval from the property's owner and the state wildlife agency. Deputy Briggs immediately compared the documents with county records. Every page matched perfectly. The truth became impossible to ignore. The HOA had never owned a single inch of Mercer Lake. Worse still, investigators discovered that Elaine had ignored multiple written warnings from Ronan before removing his locked gate and advertising the property as a public attraction. By sunset, county officials ordered the lake closed indefinitely. The investigation had just begun, and the evidence against the HOA was growing by the hour. 2 weeks later, the county courthouse was packed. Residents, reporters, and local officials filled every seat, eager to hear how a private family lake had been turned into a public attraction without the owner's permission. Outside, news vans lined the street as the case drew attention across the state. Ronan Mercer sat quietly beside his attorney, saying very little. He didn't need dramatic speeches. The evidence spoke for itself. The county presented photographs of the destroyed entrance gate, copies of the HOA's advertisements inviting tourists onto the property, security camera footage showing contractors removing Ronan's locks, and emails recovered from the HOA's internal records. One email stopped the courtroom cold. Weeks before opening the lake, an HOA board member had warned Elaine Foster that county maps identified Mercer Lake as privately owned. Elaine replied, "By the time anyone challenges us, the lake will already be seen as a neighborhood amenity. We'll deal with the paperwork later." The courtroom fell silent. Dr. Celia Vaughn then testified that the sudden influx of visitors, discarded food, and constant boat traffic had disrupted the surrounding wetlands, attracting dozens of wild alligators searching for easy sources of food. Her report concluded that the emergency closure and the costly wildlife operation could have been avoided if the HOA had respected both private property rights and environmental regulations. The judge turned to Elaine and asked a simple question. "Did you ever receive written permission from Mr. Mercer to open his lake to the public?" Elaine hesitated. Then she quietly answered, "No." That single word ended every argument. The judge ruled that the HOA had knowingly trespassed, destroyed private property, misrepresented ownership, and acted with reckless disregard for public safety. Ronan was awarded compensation for property damage, lost use of the land, legal expenses, and restoration costs. The county also ordered the HOA to reimburse the state for the expensive wildlife response. But the financial judgment was only the beginning of the HOA's downfall. The court's ruling changed Cypress Ridge Estates forever. Within a month, the HOA's insurance carrier refused to cover the judgment after investigators concluded that the board had acted knowingly rather than by mistake. Faced with hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages, legal fees, and environmental restoration costs, the HOA was forced to approve a special assessment on every homeowner. Many residents were furious when they learned the crisis had been caused not by Ronan Mercer, but by the board's decision to ignore clear property records and repeated legal warnings. At the next HOA election, nearly every board member was voted out. Elaine Foster resigned before the meeting even began, leaving through a side door as reporters waited outside. The community that had once applauded her promises of a public lake now blamed her for one of the most expensive mistakes in the neighborhood's history. Ronan could have sold Mercer Lake after the lawsuit, but he chose a different path. Instead, he restored the damaged shoreline, replaced native vegetation, repaired the broken fencing, and worked with Dr. Celia Vaughn's team to improve the surrounding wetland habitat. Over the following months, the alligators gradually returned to their natural territory as human activity around the lake disappeared. A new entrance gate was installed, this one built from heavy steel with stone pillars bearing a simple bronze plaque, Mercer Lake, family property since 1952, protected for future generations. Visitors driving past could no longer mistake the land for a community park. The county also updated its public maps to clearly identify the lake as private property, ensuring no future HOA could make the same claim. Looking across the calm water one evening, Ronan realized the greatest victory wasn't the money the court had awarded him. It was proving that no HOA, no matter how powerful or confident, could rewrite a family's history or erase the legal rights that had protected their land for generations. The lesson was simple. Property deeds always speak louder than empty promises.